Thank you so much. We appreciate your presence today. If you're visiting with us for the first time, we have a special gift for you. And so if you could just let us know, if you could stand, and we'll bring the gift right to you. So who's here for the first time? Thank you, thank you. Now, am I seeing gifts, Reverend Dusty? we may have to get you to raise your hand again, just to make sure you're getting your gift. Right there, Rick has his flower, and then we handled in the back, and then we have up here, I believe, in the front. Inside these flowers, we have money. Yeah. So we do appreciate you being here, and we affirm with you that this will be a good experience for you, and that you'll feel Spirit move in your life in a special and unique way. So we're glad you're here.
And the two readings that I get to read to you today are both by our own Ernest Holmes, the founder of our Science of Mind teachings. There is a divine principle, and what it does for us, it must do through us. Our part in the demonstration is to set the word in motion, thus compelling, through the law of subjectivity, the result of manifestation. He goes on to say, we see abundance in the universe. We cannot count the grains of sand on a single beach. The earth contains untold riches, and the very air is vibrant with power. Why then is man weak, poor, and afraid? The science of mind deals with these questions. The divine plan is one of freedom, for bondage is not God-ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. And so it is.
Well, good morning again, everybody.
Good morning.
That was a fine, fine song, Cindy.
Thank you.
And, it's talking about children. Remember when you were just a child? We may have a couple children in here, but we all used to be children, and life, if we had a really healthy perspective of it, was very different, because as a child, all things were possible. I would often tell my mom as a kid, all things are possible, anything can happen, and that's how it is as children. But when we grow up, sometimes life gets a little confusing, I suppose, and so we develop other ideas. Do you know the word antinomy? Antinomy is a nice word. Antinomy comes from two Greek words. Anti means against, and it comes from nomos, and nomos means law. And so it means against the laws of reasoning. And what that means is, if this were an A, and I would present this to you and say, this is absolutely true. This teaching is absolutely right. This is teaching A. And then over here is teaching B. And I would say, and teaching B is absolutely right. Now, when you put them together, they totally contradict each other. They don't agree at all. And so how could A and B both be true? And yet, if I'm teaching A is true. If I'm teaching B is true. But you put them together, and it's not so much it's true. Do you get it? Do you get the idea? Let me break it down a little bit. Suppose, there's a book here. And the book is Ask and It Is Given, Learning to Manifest Your Desires. Amen?
Amen.
We want to manifest our desires, and this is Esther and Jerry Hicks telling us how to do that. And they would tell us that desire is really important. It is the engine of creativity. Desire is the most wonderful thing in the whole world. Desire is what gives your life absolute meaning. Yes? Well, that wasn't much of a yes there. That was like, yeah, maybe that's true. And then over here, look, we have another book. This book is called Loving What Is. This is by Byron Katie, and she says 4 questions that can change your life. Now, if you're talking to Miss Katie, she would say, desire is something you want to stay away from. You don't want to fall into that because desire produces nothing but pain. It produces suffering. She's the lady that when she was seeing the doctor and the doctor said, I'm really sorry to tell you that you have cancer, she said, fantastic. I wonder what that will be like. I've never had cancer before. And so her attitude was to love what is. The other attitude over here is, well, how's your what is? Well, not so good. I want it to be different than it is. That's why I have desire. And so I want life to be a totally different kind of thing. And so, of course, what we do often is resist it. We spend a lot of time resisting. I don't know what your what is. I don't know how your what is doing. Sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? How's your what is? But your what is may be really pleasing you right now, but often it's not. And so what do we do with it when it doesn't please us? And we say, well, we call it contrast. Contrast is something you don't like. We could talk about your love life. You might say, I'm not really happy with that. What about your work life? Well, I'm not so happy about that either. And how's your health? And you might say, well, you know, it's going to be good. It's going to be good, and I'm working on it, but right now it's not so good. And so one side is sort of dissatisfied with now, but I'm going to make something beautiful in the future. Maybe even I hate what is now, but it's going to be better. And over here, she's encouraging us, it's more Buddhist in nature, she's encouraging us to accept what is and to actually find ways to feel good about it and kind of live from that perspective. So have you ever wondered about that? I mean, in my own life, I've wondered about this for a long time because the two approaches seem to be somewhat different. One seems to be more law of attraction kind of thing, desire kind of thing, contrast kind of thing. I don't like what is, but I'm going to create something new. And the other one seems to be about peace and contentment and just sort of taking it easy and kicking back and just accepting whatever is. And so those are the two perspectives. And I want to especially mention resistance because resistance is what we do well. We do resistance well. We push against lots of things. And so if you're creating discomfort and creating turmoil and pain and suffering because you're resisting what is, and let me break what is down. What is would be people. You know how people are. I mean, people are always, they're just not people. People don't behave very well. And so, you know, we can make a list of people we know well, and we can make suggestions and tell them how to improve their lives. And if we're really close to them, we may want to, you know, send them that list every single day almost, saying you could improve this or that. And then sometimes it's just life in general. We want life to be different. Sometimes it's ourselves. We want ourselves to be different. And so we create lots of resistance that way. But the Buddhists were right when they told us the thing we might want to consider is dropping the resistance, because I can promise you, and you probably know already because most of you look like you've lived for a while. That's the amen?
Oh, I'm not amening.
I'm not amening that. So the Buddhists would say, let's drop the resistance, because when you drop resistance, something really weird happens. You take a ball, and you know, a beach ball, and you're in the pool, and you take it and you push it all the way down, and you're holding it down, but as soon as you let it go, it pops right up to the top. It's a popper, and so are you. You will pop right up to the top. If you drop the resistance, you'll begin to feel joy and happiness and peace, because that's who you are. That's what you are. Unless you've got the resistance going. Of course, resistance takes all of that away. It's like we go down to the river, we find the boat, we jump in the boat, and we say, I'm going to enjoy the day, and we start paddling as hard as we can upstream. And so the thing that happens is we get sore. We begin to hurt because we're pushing against the current instead of just jumping in the boat and maybe just taking a nice little ride. So you see, you and I have a choice. We can either sit on this stool or we can sit on this one. We can live here or we can live there. Which do you choose? You can live with lots of desire and yet hate where you are. Or you could maybe love where you are and go with that idea. And so those are two choices, and we might change them just a bit, but those are basically the choices. Now, I know what you've been doing when you're not here. I'm excited to see who said uh-oh, because we want to really focus on you. So, yeah. What we normally do is resist. It's what you and we both do. We've been taught to resist, probably. We've been taught to push against and give our attention to what we don't like. And sometimes what we don't like, we spend most of our time thinking about it. So I'm going to suggest a new approach. I'm going to suggest maybe a different way. If you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to do it in a different way, I'm going to stick with the way I'm doing it, then that means, of course, you're really in resistance at that point because you're resisting anything new. And so the question is, how could I stop resisting? How could I stop resisting and create my ideal life? Now, that is a great question. Gee, I wish I had an answer for that. Oh, I do. That's right. So the first thing we would want to do, right? The first thing we'd want to do is recognize whether we are resisting or not. So we want to notice that. And the way you notice your resistance is you notice your pain. If I said, are you feeling happy today? And you say, no. And then if I should ask why, you would begin to talk about probably what you're resisting in your life. So your resistance can be seen by what you're feeling. Your emotions tell you if you're resisting or not. Discomfort equals resistance, and resistance equals discomfort. And we go in a circle often once we are resisting. And the sad thing is, if we are wanting to create something beautiful in our lives, if we're so busy resisting where we are at the moment, we end up repelling the very thing that we are seeking. Now, we do understand, of course, that happiness is not based on externals. Real happiness comes from within us. So that's a good principle to remember, because joy is going to come from within. And if we're resisting, we push that joy away. Another thing that we probably all have in common is we have rules. I have rules. You have rules. I have rules about how a wife should behave. Right, honey? She may have rules for her husbands as well. And so we have rules. We have rules for how our dog should behave. We have rules for how life should be. We have rules about how people we know ought to act. We have rules for our children. We have rules for how our bodies should look. We have rules for how our hair is looking and how to take care of it. We have lots of rules. Here's what I can tell you from experience. Lots of rules means lots of pain. Lots of rules, lots of suffering. In a meeting, a man stood up and they were talking about success, and he was asked, what would have to happen? What are the rules for success? And the man said, well, I'd have to make $3 million this year. I'd have to have at least 3 kinds of cars. And he mentioned the cars, and all of them were really beautiful, beautiful, amazing cars. He said, my wife would have to be behaving this way, and my 3 children would have to be making straight A's, and they'd have to be behaving this way, and my fat content in my body would have to be this. And he continued and had maybe 9 or 10 things that would have to happen for him to be a success. And so he was asked, well, how are you doing with that? And he said, well, I'm not really good. I'm not a success. I'm not a success. How does that feel? It feels bad. Another guy popped up and he said, well, I know what success is for me. Success for me is if I wake up and I'm alive, I'm a success. And so that was his rule. See, very simple. And so what that means is you'd want to be aware of your discomfort and your resistance, number one. And then number two, you want to become aware of your rules. Because I promise you, if you're mad at someone, they broke a rule. They broke a rule. And so it's not really them, it's more what's inside of you and the rule that you have. So you might want to consider taking some of your rules, putting them in a basket and just dumping them. Because rules sometimes just cause us pain. And if it's causing us pain, if it's resistant, then it means we're not really producing what we want in our lives anyway. We're just sort of stewing on how unhappy we might be. Resistance keeps happiness and joy and peace away from us. As Reverend Dusty said last week, she said something like this: if your attention is on something, the universe begins to think you must really like it a lot. And so the universe will say something like, oh, so your attention is on this, let me give you some more. Is that what you said? Close to it, isn't it? Close to it. And so that's how the universe works, because our attention is indicating that. And so again, maybe you want to make a list. Maybe you'd want to make a list of the things that you'd like to be different. And I'm not suggesting you do this for sure, but just think about it. You make your list of how you'd like everything, how you'd like your family to be different, your partner to be different, your children to be different, your life to be different. And you might consider throwing the list away. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just mentioning it. You can look at it and consider, would that be helpful or would it not be helpful? That's really the question. And maybe a better option, instead of being, someone with a checklist with rules saying, okay, today you did pretty well, yesterday not so good, and you're not going to get a check on that one, and checking things off, maybe instead we want to do a new approach. Maybe, what about this idea? What about if we were actually divine beings? That would be wild. Divine beings and having a human experience. And so we know that we live forever. Our bodies don't live forever, but we do. We never die. We've never been born. We're eternal. And suppose we've come to this experience just to play a little game. It's just a game. It's just a game. It's a game of creation. And so we're playing this little game. And so instead of being so concerned about rules, we're going to lighten up just a bit. We're going to lighten up, and we're going to be, let me suggest some ideas. We're going to be curious. Like Byron Katie, when she said, oh, I've never had cancer before. I wonder what that would be like. And the doctor was, she said, blown away. You can imagine. I mean, that's not human to talk like that, is it? It's odd. So maybe curiosity about life. Wonder what's going to happen today. Curiosity and discovery. And maybe approaching life with a sense of peace and a sense of trust. What about that one? Trust. I plant my seed and I know the seed is going to sprout. I trust that's going to happen. And instead of trying to make things happen, because when you try to make things happen, it makes you perspire. Instead of trying to make it happen, maybe just allow life to flow. Just allow it to happen. It's like being an artist. Pam, there's Pam. Pam is a great artist, and I thought about her when I thought about this because it's approaching life as an artist. I actually talked to her once about coming up and doing a picture while I'm talking. She refused. But, it's approaching life in that way. It's approaching life creating beauty. Creating beauty. You see how that's very different than keeping the rules. You see what I mean? Because the real magic happens. You've been looking for magic. The real magic happens when you drop resistance, when you stop pushing so hard against something. That's when it happens. And so that means, how do we begin? We begin with clarity. We think about what would we like to have in our life. It's okay to think about that. And I do it in a light-hearted way. It's a sweet way. Wouldn't it be interesting to have this? Wouldn't it be interesting to do that? And so you see, there's a difference. I'm kind of flowing with it. And then the second thing you must do, and this is where sometimes we don't do it. Often when we decide what we want to have in our lives, then we go to our worry chair. And we worry. And we fret. And we jump in the boat and paddle upstream as hard as we can. And so it's painful because we're so busy resisting where we presently are. So instead of that, we get clarity and then we go to our happy place. Then we create our happy place. Then we create our peaceful place. Because if you're going to create what you really want in life, you must do it from contentment. You must do it from love. Because if you're, I have a chair at home on the 3rd floor, which Mary Pat, she doesn't like my chair. I'm not sure why. It's a beautiful blue chair, but now she's put it in a place where she never sees it. But I call it my creation chair. If I want to have ideas, if I want to create something, if I want to have beautiful thoughts, I enjoy sitting in that blue chair. You want to have a place like that. It doesn't have to be a chair. It doesn't have to be a literal place. But you want to create that peaceful stance. Because if your stance is, I hate this, it's not good. If your stance is, I despise my life right now, but it's going to be better someday. It might not be if you really hate where you are. Find a way to be happy where you are. Bloom where you're planted. Because that determines whether or not your dreams come true or not. It begins, the Buddhists were right, it begins with contentment and peace and those beautiful, beautiful emotions. You're magnetizing mojo, and all of us need some mojo. The mojo comes from contentment and from peace. Reading in the Bible, in Philippians, which is found in the New Testament, it says this. The guy who's writing this is in prison. Now, you'd expect a guy in prison not to be very happy. And so he's writing this little book, and in this little 4-chapter letter, the word he uses most often is rejoice. What's wrong with that guy? I mean, he's in prison. He could be killed. And he's rejoicing left and right, left and right. What is he doing? Well, he's making his stool joy and peace. And he said this. He said, I am not saying, he said, I've learned to be content in all and every circumstance. And see, that's possible. It's really possible to do exactly that. And so I'm suggesting that you have to create from some position. And you want your position to be joy, peace, and contentment. And not, boy, do I hate this. I can't stand another day of this. I despise this situation, because that will dig your hole deeper and deeper and deeper. So your question must be, how can I find joy? How can I find peace and not misery in this kind of situation? Contentment means to be at ease. It means if I said, how's your life? You would say, all is well. It is really interesting. You never know what's going to happen. It's like Forrest Gump said, except he was on an island. He was a castaway once. And Forrest Gump said, he said, you never know what the tide is going to bring in. And so he didn't curse the island. He kept thinking, wow, something really exciting may come in today. And that makes all the difference in the world. So you take your little seed, you take your dream, you take your idea, and you plant it. In this writing, he said, I've learned the secret of being content no matter what. And I was interested in the word secret. So when he said, I have learned the secret, that phrase comes from one Greek word. We've locked the doors because I'm only sharing this with you. We don't want other people to know about this. But when he talked about secret, he was talking about what they called in those days mystery religions. He's talking about spooky stuff. He was talking about magic. He was talking about creating out of nothing. He was talking about good stuff, esoteric kinds of things. And he said, I know the, and then there was a pause, and there was music. The secret. I like the word secret, especially with that in mind. It was used to mean that now you're initiated into the secret society. And I'm going to initiate all of you in just a moment. It won't hurt. It only costs $19.95. Just kidding about that. Is it 25 now? No. So here's the secret. The secret is, and you can read that little letter, because the secret, part of the secret is realizing that all the power in the universe is available to flow. One secret. The second secret is you create from fullness, not emptiness. Fullness. You create from power. You create from contentment. You create from love. You create not pushing against anything, but you create in that way. Now, I like the law of attraction, and I love the Abraham books, and I love Byron Katie as well. I love all of those things, and I think it's possible to bring them together. But sometimes with the law of attraction, do you know what we think? We think that, like, I'm up here, and suppose back in the booth where Suzanne is, suppose there's something back there I'd like to have, and so I'm trying to attract it. I'm trying to get that back there to come to me. And it may be, in your case, a job. It could be a man, could be a woman, could be a puppy, could be anything. And you're trying to get it to come to you. And you're trying. And at this point, you're perspiring. And you're talking about how you don't like your present situation. I just want a man. Give me a man. Give me a woman, please. Give me something to work with. And so you're trying to bring it to you. And if you were a cowgirl or a cowboy, you would lasso it and you would pull it to you. But even that's very efforting. You have to really try hard to do that. So let me suggest something different. Because that's the image, you know, you're attracting it. What are you doing today? Attracting it. So, here's what's different. Suppose instead of attracting it, suppose I just stay here, and suppose I'm trying to attract love. And the love is back there, and I'm up here. And so what I do is expand my consciousness. I don't try to get it to come to me. That's a lot of efforting. So what if I just expand my consciousness? What if I think, okay, love is a certain frequency. I'm going to become that frequency. Whatever it is I'm trying to attract, I'm going to become. Shamans call it grokking. You can do that because you become that frequency. You want something sweet, so you can't, be a turkey with everybody because you've got to be sweet. And so you become sweet. If you're attracting sweetness, you become sweetness. Attracting love, you become love. And you become it. Think of yourself as water. It's called the seeping principle. Instead of attraction, this is seeping. S-E-E-P-I-N-G. I'll give you an example. Water. And this, my friend, is a paper towel. And suppose, and you'll have to use your imagination, but suppose you're right in the middle, and what you're wanting is over here to the side. And you can do this at home. Do it at home and watch it, because that's what I'm encouraging you to do. I'm encouraging you to expand. And so you're like water. And so I just pour the water here, and I'm seeing it. You're not seeing it, but when you do it at home, you'll see it. And what happens is the water is very quickly flowing, seeping. And that's what you do with your consciousness. Whatever it is you're seeking, you become. And you know what you can do when you do that? You can do it in peace. You're not struggling anymore. You're thinking, I'm looking for love. I am love. I love everybody. Look at that little child. Oh, I bless that child. I love that little girl. I love that little boy. I love that puppy. Look at those people petting the cat. I love those people. I'm just loving all over. And what you're doing is expanding. And if that's what you're seeking, it's what you become. You can taste it because you absolutely become that. I like seeping. I like seeping. It's what Jesus meant when he said you pray, and in the same prayer you say, and thank you, it's done. And that's what it's like, because it is done. It's like you're planting your watermelon seed, and you don't dig it up in a week and say, what's happening in there? Because you know it's happening. And so you do it, because after all, you're divine. This is a game. You're just playing a game. You're just enjoying yourself, you see? And so it works in a very peaceful, peaceful way. One other thing I need to mention. How do I learn contentment? And I'm glad you asked me that. How do you learn contentment? Well, you can't take Contentment 101. Now, the reason I know this is because in that writing I read, Philippians chapter 4, he said, I know how to be content. I know how. So I naturally want to know, how do you know? How? How do you know? And it tells us there how you know. You don't learn how by reading a book. You don't learn how by listening to a CD. You don't learn how by listening to a talk. The Greek word he uses is oida. And that word means you learn from experience. See, it's very specific. That's how you learn. So that means you have to practice. And what do you practice? You practice examining your life and asking, am I feeling peace right now? Ooh, no, I'm not. Let me shift a bit let me find peace in this moment. Am I feeling lots of anxiety? I am. So let me shift a bit so I can find that peace. And so it takes that kind of practice. And so that means at first you may not be that good at it. You may think, man, I've checked myself every 15 minutes, and every time I check, I ain't got no peace. And so you want to keep practicing, because it takes time. It takes time. And you find peace by simply asking, what could I feel peaceful about? Just ask the question. Your brain will give you the answer. It will give you the answer. It will say, well, you could feel peace about this. And if you concentrate on that for just a moment or two, it will have a baby. And then you have a second thing. It will. And then it will have a third thing. Just like if you focus on what you're not thankful for, you'll come up, they have babies too, and you'll have a lot of those. And so they reproduce after their own kind. And so you simply ask, what am I feeling peaceful about? What am I grateful for? What am I happy about? Because that must be the platform from which you create, not creating from misery. And of course we will. And then you're a professional seeper. And that's a good thing to be. So let me ask you, would you like, and it's not going to hurt and it doesn't cost anything, would you like to be initiated into the society of divine creation? Yes. Okay, we got a deal going then. Okay, raise your right hand, please. And you'll have to repeat after me. God is what I am.
God is what I am.
I am what God is.
I am what God is.
I create just like God does.
I create just like God does.
Not out of pain.
Not out of pain.
I create out of peace.
I create out of peace.
I create out of joy.
I create out of joy.
I create out of bliss.
I create out of bliss.
you're in. Give yourself a hand. I mean, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. If you read about, the creation in Genesis chapter 1, if you read about that, it's like God says, well, let there be light. And then God says, yeah, that's good. And let there be sky. Ooh, that's good. And let the earth bring forth animals. Ooh, that's good. And let the waters bring forth fish. Yeah, that's good. And so that's the kind of creation you do. Instead of saying, oh, I'm making it happen, you say, let this be. Wouldn't this be interesting? I like this idea. And then you allow it to be. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Turn with me, please. Well, we know who we are. We know God is all that is, and every place in its fullness. And that includes within us. We know who we are. We know that resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, smelled, but it can be felt. And so now, from this moment, we are going to be keenly aware when we are resisting. Our pain tells us. And we understand now that it distracts and it stops our creativity. And so we have released it. We've let resistance go. And in our experience, it will take a little practice to do that. But we can do that because we can honestly make statements like these. I am a creator. I am at peace. All is well in my life. I am love. I am joy. And I love what is, and I'm looking forward to the adventure of seeing what happens next. Oh, that's a beautiful way to live. And that's who we are. That's why we've come to this planet. That's why we're incarnated, so that we can live from that perspective. And so our minds are open, our hearts are open, and we send this word out, and we place it into a soil, into the soul of the universe, into a principle that always says yes, always says yes, always says yes. And so as we live from joy and peace, it always says yes. And so we are thankful for this life experience right now. Thankful and grateful. We receive it fully, and we are full of joy, and we say and confirm that this is the truth with the words, and so it is.